been a certain weaponization of some of the legacy pieces that were created over the course of the arguments for now since 1988, when Al Gore and Tim Wirth, myself, a group of us, first listened to Jim Hansen testify and tell us that this was here, now, then. This was 1988. And indeed, it was happening. So we now find ourselves in a place where the debate has renewed, but not around facts, where there's been a massive branding effort, negative branding, of ESG, wokeism, and climate. And climate has been suggested that it is somehow woke and discardable, whether it's a hoax or otherwise. So let me be very clear here. The reason I wanted to come and chat a little bit with you and with others is because we have to change this discussion. And we have to shift gears and recognize what the demands of the marketplace of ideas needs at this point in time. I will say to you, though, obviously this is a time when the climate challenge is growing, not diminishing. And no matter how much any politician wants to will it away, it won't disappear just by will. It takes action. It takes commitment. It takes leadership. And it's very clear that when you measure what other countries are doing, I mean, we are the only country in the world who has a president who has decided to get out of the Paris Agreement. And you have to ask yourself, what do all those other presidents, finance ministers, environment ministers, prime ministers, monarchs, and others around the world, what do they know that somehow has not penetrated the upper levels of our government? So it's important to understand that there is no viable climate policy without understanding and marrying the current economic policies. They're linked. And there's no viable economic policy that isn't deeply entwined in climate. And I think that's sort of the beginning place where this discussion can begin to become more productive. We seem to be trapped in a strange dichotomy in the world where there are two spheres that are linked. But even as they're linked, they seem to be pushing in two very different directions. I travel a lot still. I'm talking to leaders in various parts of the world, and I can feel this in all of the dialogue on a global basis. And more as I compare these two tracks, intertwined but pulling apart, it reminds me of the opening line of Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. So it's the best of times because on one side there's an invigorated economic transformation happening now, well underway, at an increasingly extraordinary speed and a growing scale. Many of you, I hope, have read John Doerr's book and Tom Starr's books about speed and scale, what we need. And it's the best of times because this is happening at the dawn of the AI age, which, if managed correctly, can contribute significantly to it. And I guess the way to summarize it is just say there's an amazing amount that is happening right now, folks, on our shores, in our laboratories, in communities. And we need to take note of that and honor what it means in terms of the politics of those communities and the jobs and the possibilities that lie ahead. So it's the worst of times because on the other side of the upside I just described, there's an increasingly fractious, contested political and diplomatic story unfolding as we speak in Belém with COP30, where too many governments are willingly pulling back, not even pushed, but taking advantage of those places where there is a push to duck, to hide, and not to stand up and fight for what we already agreed to do. There are too many governments who are backstepping or voluntarily surrendering opportunities for their own economies. And I think that it's pretty obvious to all that China fills vacuum after vacuum after vacuum. And if you're committed to try to compete with China, as we are publicly on a bipartisan basis, and committed to want to continue to lead, you can't just exit the battlefield. There's no way to make that happen. It doesn't work. Now, I want you to contrast those two descriptions I just gave you with this headline from Bloomberg. I think it was on Saturday. It was Friday or Saturday. Here it is. You know who believes in climate change? The stock market. That's a headline in Bloomberg. The S&P Global Clean Energy Index has outpaced the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100 and the MSCI World Index and many leading stocks, obviously linked to the boom in AI, but on their own this is happening. I can tell you in my hat, wearing my hat as executive chair of Galvanize, where we are have an unbelievable team of people, many of whom left a Goldman or other places here in New York and elsewhere to come and make decisions that are going to prove to the world that the marketplace here is active and alive and extremely rewarding in terms of returns on investment. So Bloomberg's Prepare and Repair Index, which is made up of companies that benefit from the downsides of the climate crisis, when things are destroyed, when you need to rebuild, when you need your electricity up, new, more resilient electricity and so forth, you turn to these folks. And that index has absolutely shattered the S&P over the past 5 years, more than doubling its return. And I can tell you, because we have, in Galvanize, we have a public equities strategy, and it's now 3 years old. And in that public equity strategy this year, year to date, we're up 55%. You show me how many other people are doing something like that on any of those other indexes or otherwise. So, my friends, in the last year, the amazing indicators, this is not rocket science, this is pretty obvious to people. Electricity generated by nuclear power with zero emissions energy is now the highest it has been in our history on the planet, writ large, which is an extraordinary comeback from where it's been in recent years because of Fukushima and by 3 Mile Island and so forth. So in the last year, renewables, by the way, also have generated more electricity on a global basis for the first time in human history than coal during the first part of 2025. So if you look through last year, all the new power plants installed in the world, 10% run on fossil fuel, 5% are nuclear, and 85% are now renewable. And it's clear to anybody in the field, if you're out there trying to build energy of one kind or another, it's very difficult to be able to do that without recognizing what is happening in terms of costs. This revolution is going to be driven by cost, particularly at a moment where affordability is on the table the way it is now. And let me just give you an indicator. In Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, Texas, California, and parts of them, insurance companies are pulling out. They're not going to insure. And people are getting letters from their insurance companies saying, here's what's happened to your premium because we have to pay for these increased storms and the increased amount of damage and so forth. So capital is following this trend. And in 2025, global energy investment is going to peak at about 3.3 trillion, 2/3 of which is going towards renewables. For the first time in history, fossil fuel was outgunned by renewable fuel investment 2 to 1, 2.1 trillion to 1 trillion. And that's going to continue if you talk to the IEA or others who are prognosticating about where we're going in terms of energy. So you got to ask yourself, if that's where the marketplace is saying so clearly in the language of investing and innovation, then how do we now embolden global diplomacy to be able to take advantage of this and to get people to think a little more groundedly, I guess one way to say it. So I've been asked a number of times as I travel around, people say, well, if the market is doing it anyways, do we need summits? Do we need country commitments? Do we need policy frameworks? Do we need another COP? And the answer is, folks, simple, we do, for a lot of different reasons. It's like the UN. It frustrates the hell out of you, but if you didn't have it, you'd have to invent it. Because there are things you have to, work out with other countries. The world just doesn't work otherwise. And contrary to folks who argue about the United States separating itself from all of these other efforts, the truth is that doesn't strengthen our country. And what has happened globally in this now non-unipolar world is exactly what the United States and many of the people in the portraits around this building wanted to do ever since World War II ended. And almost everything we've done diplomatically then has been to try to adhere to a set of values and standards which excite people in terms of ideas and the possibilities of the future of what it means for other countries. You look at Japan, you look at Germany, are great examples of the Marshall Plan and of all of the US efforts post-war. And you see the most incredible living example of a very powerful two democracies and very powerful two economies. That's what we set out to do. And we should now not complain about it or start arguing somehow there's a better world out there that ignores the rest of the world. Not going to happen. I think every one of you is part of this institution because you know that and you believe that inherently. But we haven't been fighting for it. We haven't been out there clear enough to the American people about how this affects them and how it affects the prices that are now driving them nuts and feeling that nobody's in control and they're paying a price they can't afford to pay. And they are. So I'm not going to go into tariffs. I think everybody here understands what Ronald Reagan said, that, tariff is a tax and you move on from there. But it obviously has profound downstream impacts on cost of living for people because somebody pays that bill and you all know who ain't doing it. So it seems to me, and I'll just wrap up very quickly because I want to make the opening comments to get the questions. The COP in Belém has an opportunity to be able to perhaps move things forward a little bit. I can't tell you that I have confidence that it's going to do what we did in Dubai. And for my money, having been at this for quite a few years, Dubai was the strongest agreement we ever had anywhere, building on the Paris Agreement, which required people to do something. In Dubai, we said, with all 195 countries, 195, 200 countries signing on, or at least not blocking, which is a big deal. Believe me, I can tell you how close it has come to disaster on many occasions, and we had to backtrack on some terminology. Not true of Dubai. So Dubai, we said, all of us, we have to transition away from fossil fuel, according to the science, which means 1.5, in order to achieve net zero by 2050, in a way that is just and equitable, which is how you deal with island states and less developing countries. And finally, most importantly, accelerating in this decade. That's the language, paragraph 28. Well, we ain't doing it. People aren't doing it. They're going the other way. Emissions up, damage up, costs to communities up. It just doesn't make sense. You know, you could label it any number of things, including insane, but it's where we are. So we have no right to complain unless we start fighting back with common sense about the opportunities in the economy to build out. This is going to grow even more with AI, but you can't do AI, you know, you can't have the power you need for AI if you're not rapidly deploying renewables. Nobody's going to win this fight in a way that will be satisfactory to anybody unless we are proving to ourselves that the price is something the marketplace needs to take advantage of. So I encourage everybody here to think about how we will do that in these ensuing months. And if so, we can really change where the world is going. Last thing I'll say, Vijay. I had the privilege of leading our negotiations in Paris, in Glasgow, in Sharm el-Sheikh, and in Dubai. So I've been through the trends. And I was there in 1997 when we did Kyoto, and I was there in 1992 when we started this journey with President George H.W. Bush, helping to lead the charge. That's what we've got to get back to. And we have to get back there on basic arguments of economics and common sense, costs, and we win on price, because you can't build an AI data center fast enough to win the fight unless you have renewables at a major level. And that's what they're doing in Texas right now. Texas is proving the case. They've got more wind deployed in Texas, Republican governor, 2 Republican senators, and they're not going to change that, and they're going to continue to deploy wind because that's how they ameliorate the prices, and that's how they make the whole thing work. So folks, we can win. That's the point I want to make, not the politics of win. We can win for the country and the basic policy here if we will do the things we said we're going to do, recognizing it's good economics, it's great economics, it's great for the health of our citizens, and it will provide us with stronger security. Those are the 3 bedrock arguments on which we need to organize the climate fight. Vijay.